This past Sunday, Martina Navratilova was interviewed by Bob Schieffer on CBS, and she talked about how difficult it was for her to come out. Billie Jean King did as well, and in the case of Billie Jean King, she says that the reason she came out is because an ex-lover outed her. And in conversations with her lawyer, with her publicist, they all advised her not to come out. She said she had to, and then she came out. She had a press conference and came out, or came out to the New York Times in 1981. However, Glenn Burke played professional baseball from 1976 to 1979. He played for the Oakland Athletics and for the LA Dodgers. And 2 years ago, LGBT put out a PSA that said this:
Glenn Burke was the first openly gay Major League Baseball player. For information about the 31 lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender icons, visit LGBTHistoryMonth.com.
Doug Harris produced Out, the Glenn Burke Story website, DougHarrisMedia.com. Mr. Doug Harris, thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Larry.
Doug, who was the first male athlete to come out for a major American professional team?
Well, you know, the jury's still out, Larry, on someone coming out who's actually under contract. You know, a couple of years ago, John Amici, who was an NBA basketball player for the Orlando Magic, came out, but it was after his career.
Right.
And I think one of the interesting things that's going on right now is that we have players like such as Jason Collins, who came out recently, but he's not under a contract with a team.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the real interesting thing about, you know, players coming out on major sports, professional sports teams that is,
mm-hmm.
is that we have to see a player who comes out who's in the middle of a 5-year contract. You know, like Jason Collins is a free agent. So, and when you think back about Glenn Burke kept no secrets about his sexuality, and he was under contract, and you know, all of his teammates knew that he was gay, and the management knew that he was gay.
And the media did.
Some of the media, but the media wouldn't report on it.
Mm-hmm.
Glenn Burke came out in 1982, 2.5 years after he was what most people consider removed from the game.
But the point is, Doug Harris, that he had come out to his teammates, to management, and even to members of the media while he was under contract. They chose not to report it. That's not his fault.
Exactly.
So the answer to my question, Doug Harris, you're being very polite and very respectful to Jason Collins, is that Glenn Burke deserves the accolades, if you're going to give accolades to a male athlete for being gay, coming out while he's still playing, while under contract with a major professional American sports team.
I would definitely say so, and then we have to remember, you know, Glenn Burke was a person of integrity, and he stood tall and proud of his sexual orientation, and that's one thing that we have to all remember. And I think a lot of times in the media that they latch on to a story without really digging deep into the facts, and I think that's one of the things that's happening right now. And no offense to Jason Collins,
mm-hmm.
but you know, people have to really understand the history and what people did prior.
Doug Harris is my guest. He's the producer of a documentary called Out, the Glenn Burke Story. Website, DougHarrisMedia.com. Doug, in your documentary, you tell us that the Dodgers even offered Glenn Burke $75,000 to put on some sort of sham marriage, and he refused.
Yeah, he did refuse, and it was real interesting when we interviewed Glenn's sister in her comments about that marriage, and in talking to her brother about the situation and how he just didn't feel comfortable and he wasn't going to go along with that. And Doug,
$75,000 was $75,000 in those days.
Oh, $75,000 was a lot more than it is now.
and a lot of players weren't even making that.
That's absolutely correct.
And so they offered it to him. He said, "Hell no." He said, get married to a woman?"
yeah, that was.
And Doug, your documentary also points out that people like Dusty Baker feel that Glenn Burke's orientation got him traded from the Dodgers.
Yeah, that was one of the things. And when we talked to Davey Lopes was rather pissed off about the whole fact that that they traded Glenn away.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things about Glenn was the lifeblood of the team. He was the leader in the clubhouse, and the Dodgers at that time had a really good chemistry. They had just came off a World Series loss to the New York Yankees, and so they were a team that was really coming up. And, a lot of the players were really upset at the fact that they would trade this up-and-coming star away from the organization just because of his sexuality.
And, Doug, you describe him as an up-and-coming star. When you look at his record, though, it's not that impressive. Was he getting better? Do you feel that he wasn't getting opportunities to play because of his orientation? Why do you feel that he was an up-and-coming star?
Well, I think a lot of the distraction about his sexuality had a lot to do with him maybe not spending the time that he needed to after practice. A lot of times in pro sports, players work out after practice, and I think that Glenn's biggest problem was hitting the curveball, and so that if he probably could have spent a little bit more time working on that aspect, he would have had a phenomenal career.
Doug, if Glenn Burke were here and watching all of this hoopla over Jason Collins, what do you suppose he'd say?
What about me? He'd probably say, what about me? Glenn had no problem tooting his own horn, and he was a really outspoken person, and really nice person, and I think he'd be real happy right now at the way things are going in our society today in terms of people coming out. But, he just – I really think Glenn Burke was before his time.
And, Doug, I asked you what do you think Glenn Burke would say. Let me ask you, Doug Harris. You produced this documentary called Out. Here it is, all about the first male athlete to come out for a major professional American team. And then you turn on the TV and you see all this stuff over Jason Collins. How did you feel, Doug?
Well, like the first thing I thought of was, like, what was the real motive behind Jason Collins coming out as being, a gay player? And, was his motive to get another contract? Was his motive to get it off his chest? And, I have a few reservations about the fact that Jason Collins was in a relationship for 8 years and kept it a secret from his fiancée. But that's a whole nother subject.
Mm-hmm.
But, I wish Jason Collins the best, and I think he's very courageous for what he did. And then the jury will be out to see if, an NBA team will pick him up as a free agent. He's 35 years old,
right.
So that may be a little problematic. But he, like Glenn Burke, didn't have stellar numbers as a professional. And so, once again, Larry, the true test is going to be that superstar athlete
right.
that's currently under a multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract. What will happen if they come out?
Well, Doug, thank you very much for joining us. He produced Out, the Glenn Burke story. Again, website, DougHarrisMedia.com. Doug, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Larry.